can't see how to fix the volume here. Okay, I just wanted you to hear some singing so that I don't have to sing. Better to let my colleagues do it. To start, I think what I wanted to be able to do is just to show you some pictures so that you will be able to contextualize some of the comments that I hope to share with you today, to make with you today. And then I'll just maybe talk a bit about WOZA and what we do. One of the key principles of WOZA is that we come from a context where political leaders sent others to do the hard work and were not ever present in the streets, in the trenches themselves. So you'll see that in the most of these protests, myself and the other key leaders play a frontline role. Sorry, do I use this? Right. A very key issue of our demonstrations is that we always, every minute, every few minutes, want to send a very clear signal that we are observing nonviolent discipline. We do that through the use of slogans. Some of you may think slogans belong to political parties, but for us it's a very key way to deliver our message. It's a very key way to help us also overcome fear and to keep us focused on the objective that we want to achieve. And so you can see we use this symbol. It doesn't mean loser. I know in America you like to think it means loser. It's just the L shape, it's love, and we are there in love for our country, love for Zimbabwe, and actually we don't even really care which hand you use. So here you see the slogans being given. It's the love spear, you strike a woman, you strike a rock. There are many different slogans that we use. For us, civil disobedience means that you have to go to where the snake lives and put a stick there and deliver your message. We don't only march to create and build courage in Zimbabweans, we also want to workshop the police. And so sometimes we go right to the steps of their office and we workshop them there. You can see here we are actually submitting a complaint to the police about treatment by riot police. The lady that you see over here, I suppose there's no pointer there, this lady standing next to me in my Love Chicago hat is Bertha Sibanda. She was there to talk about how she was beaten, and shortly after that we were all arrested, and she was so incensed by what she did that she continued the protest right in the courtyard of the police station and disrobed. A lot of what we do is also dancing, and you can see me there dancing with my colleagues in the front. The police are just watching. They're really not sure what to do. You can see some of these are the big bosses going in and out and trying to strategize on how to get rid of us. This is another protest where you see all the police coming, and you can see the gentleman holding the camera is not one of our members. He is a member of the Law and Order Department of the Zimbabwe Republic Police, shooting the video so that if they arrest us and try to convict us, there will be photographic image of who did what during the protest. And all those other people you see are all riot police, standing, milling. It is said that to be a strategic nonviolent movement, you have to be able to pull the pillars of support, shake them. On this 15th of March, 2 months ago, we marched 8 city blocks And in those 8 city blocks, we were stopped 4 times by different command structures of the Zimbabwe Republic Police, showing that there was no longer a centralized command structure able to talk to us, able to stop us, able to engage us. They all wanted to have a crack at us, and we managed to persuade them in all those 4 instances that actually we are here, we are marching, and we are going to carry on with our march. So you can see there the negotiating, continuing. There you can see me in my pink hat and the baton stick raised to threaten me, but we managed to continue our march that day. I'll come back to those other issues for the moment. WOZA was formed in 2002 after a consultative process. At the time that we formed WOZA, there was a raft of unjust laws in place. There was a deep culture of fear. And in that culture of fear, people basically didn't have any space to talk. You couldn't meet in more than 3 people. There were multiple arrests. There was detentions. And this is a legacy that came from the colonial government. Robert Mugabe and his other comrades also were arrested under the Public Order Security Act that they now arrest us under. And that culture of fear that prevailed, we felt was causing widespread economic decay. And we felt that as the mothers of the nation, as the women of Zimbabwe, we were bearing the brunt of that crisis. It was us who had to carry that burden on our shoulders and on our heads. And so we said, why are we silent? Why do we want our tears to flow out of the front door into the streets? Who is going to feel pity for us if we don't do something ourselves? And so we started to consult and form a movement. We said we wanted to form a movement that would talk about bread and butter issues. We wanted to break polarization where it was only about who was the minister, who was the prime minister, who was in power and who was not in power. We wanted to bring the discourse back to everyday issues. And we wanted to walk a middle road in talking about those issues. We said that we wanted to show courage as mothers of the nation. We wanted the nation to see that we were speaking and doing things in a new way in Zimbabwe with love in our hearts, thereby the slogan, and the fight to bring the discourse back to ordinary, everyday issues, and to also focus Zimbabweans and give them courage. When we started, we didn't have any clue of Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi. We just sat and spoke, talked of our issues and said, where do we need to be seen? How do we need to do it? And we started to do it. Possibly we have the Zimbabwe Republic Police to thank for immediately answering our first demonstration with repression, because that then challenged us and made us into a civil disobedience movement that you know us all for today. For us in WOZA, we are not fighting a revolution. We are not likely to be going into our Tahrir Square anytime soon. We are fighting an evolution. We want to be able to change the hearts and minds of ordinary Zimbabweans. We want to build a democracy, a new Zimbabwe, from the bottom to the top. And we are not going to do that by one-off events. What we also do in WOZA, you know us for these demonstrations, but actually 95% of our work is civic education, training people. How do you plan? How do you strategize? What does Gene Sharp say in his 198 methods? How can we come up with more to add to the 198? How should we respond? How do we overcome fear? How do we compile our issues so that we make our arguments? How do we write our messaging on our placards? That is the civic education work that we do to build the movement and to make sure we are focused on what are real issues. With the help that we have received from ICNC and the Serbian teams, we were also then able to develop our issues into something that we call the People's Charter. And that brings in all the issues, it brings in our vision of a new Zimbabwe. When we are now entering a constructive phase, we know what it is we will be trying to demand. For us, we also then came across the Human Rights Defenders Protocol, and we adopted it. We said, for us, we will we will 100% conform to non-violence and to universality of rights. And that became a very important training tool for us and making people commit to maintaining those two principles, not only in the protest space, but in their personal lives. We also said that if we are going to ask people to come and march with us, as you've just seen us, knowing that the police will run immediately and hit us with their baton sticks and arrest us, that we must have some sort of protection, some sort of help. And so we asked you, we asked some of you, we asked the international community, we asked the local and the regional people to please share in our struggle. And our message was very simple. You may be enjoying your rights today, but will you still be enjoying them tomorrow? So help us defend the rights that we are no longer enjoying in Zimbabwe today. So the immediate strategy of sending messages, writing press statements, and hooking in that international solidarity was absolutely vital. Many police officers, police bosses will say, no, 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 I don't want to see WOZA people being brought to my police station for detention, because my phone will start to be ringing from Poland, from Paris, of people saying, what are you doing with those WOZA women? So that was a very important part of our strategy from the beginning. We also said that we wanted to expose injustices. And the injustice of this regime, arresting women who were saying we cannot afford to educate our children, we cannot afford to buy bread, was a very important injustice. And the detaining of us and keeping us in prison became even more of an injustice that we needed to expose with local, regional, international help. As we found that we were mobilizing and doing these protests, we realized our weakness was that we were only focusing on an event, and we were too focused on just protest. And so with some help from the Serbians, we realized that we had to actually build a structure, a mobilization structure that would be able to match the mobilization, but would also transform our activists from just a human rights defending through an event to making them do activities on a daily basis to defend their rights, which we call low-risk activities. We already had the high risk. We started with the high risk, and then we had to introduce the low risk. I recommend doing it the other way around. So we formed a structure. We used a multi-level marketing system, and this is why I said, for us, we are not an informal social movement. We have the specific structure, 5 levels of leadership. We have annual elections, and people all play their role in conducting their own activities and reporting and being part of very small national or local street activities, or to the national or to parliament, and so on. So all of this information that we get, we then are able to bring it into lobby and advocacy, whether it's at street level or at national level. Our brand of civil disobedience, we like to say we include femininity, creativity, and we call it tough love. It's the disciplining love of a mother who is saying that, Robert Mugabe, this child of Zimbabwe, you are destroying your country, and we are going to discipline you by our placards, by our presence, by our numbers. Arrest us if you want to, but it's not going to stop us from playing our role as your mother. When we, in the first few years, we were managing to mobilize numbers and numbers and numbers, but, I was just complaining to my Tunisian brother over there to say that if he could have just warned me before that, Jenny, increase your security because we are going to do something in Tunis, it might have helped me a bit. Because suddenly, after Tunisia, after Egypt, the Zimbabwe Republic Police said, what the hell are we doing allowing these women to march in the street? And so they increased their repression on us because of the events in other parts of Africa and the Arab world. We had to adopt strategies. We could no longer have one march, because if we organized one protest, the police would come, and because our marches are civil disobedience, we don't notify the police ahead of the demonstration. We will just agree that we are starting our demonstration at this time, and at this time, someone who would be pre-selected as the person who's going to start the demonstration will go into the street and give the slogan, and people are supposed to come in and gather. Those who are chosen to hold the banner will hold the banner, and we try and get the march up and running. But because of the repression, we then had to agree that, okay, instead of having one demonstration that gets compromised, they don't let us march, and we don't reach the target and deliver the messages we want to deliver, let's have multiple demonstrations. So we spread the risk, we stretched the resources of the police. So now instead of one, they have to look for 10 different parts of the city where we may be gathering and protesting. The arrests and detentions, the effect that they have had on us has been quite a challenge for us, but there has been a major backfire. Over 3,000 of us have faced arrest. I myself have been arrested 52 times. At the beginning of the year, I was praying that my number of arrests would not exceed my age. Unfortunately, I turned 50 in April, and I then already had 52 arrests, which is quite a challenge for my children to explain to their friends. But the detentions, the effect that those had, when they would arrest Jenni Williams as the leader, or Magodonga Mahlangu, or some of the other members, all of us would say, well, she wasn't there alone. We were there. And so we would often march to the police station. One time I remember even knocking on the door and saying, here we are, let us in. You've got our colleagues there. And one of those instances was one of the pictures you saw, where they arrested 20, 192 of us ended up sitting in the courtyard under arrest. And that strategy has been very significant at breaking the pillars of support. It has also been very important solidarity, because it makes people feel that they are part of a united struggle and they're not alone. Because if you're a woman alone, you are possibly going to face torture, rape, and you already are in the most horrific conditions that you can ever imagine. The regime have tried different strategies. As they went to an election in 2008, they then tried to deny us bail. Sometimes it's difficult to explain this legal term, but when you are arrested and arraigned to court, you are submitted to go home and come and face trial. And they denied us that right and held us in custody pending a trial. That also caused major challenges for us. I think I've spent over 2 months in custody since 2008, which has been a challenge. But we have found ways to even come up with strategies around explaining that and making people understand that it's a victory for us to find ourselves wearing the remand uniform in a prison, because it means, and sometimes the prosecutors, they've even said it, that these people at large during an election period, they will mobilize. And so they admit that we are good mobilizers. As I mentioned, the pulling of pillars of support, it is a common belief, or maybe people think they understand, that Mugabe has a stranglehold on the military in Zimbabwe because of our legacy of the armed liberation war, and all these liberation war people came and then were mobilized into the army and into the police, etc. And so people feel that Mugabe has been propped up and kept in power for almost 33 years, 34 years, because of that war veteran base that he strategically placed. And by the way, he's also strategically placing those in the business community too. But what we have found is that as his hold on that becomes less, because he uses patronage, and that patronage is not an exhaustive pocket of money, and it becomes difficult with who he's going to give the diamond concessions to, who he's going to give the mines to. It becomes a challenge for him because he's going to leave other people out. And so what we found on the 15th of March was very significant for us, and a very important victory, that in the 8-block march, 4 different command structures tried to stop us, tried to demobilize us. And it's a very important lesson to also learn, that very often it's a weakness of these military people that they're supposed to have one centralized command structure and they just blindly follow orders. But if that command structure falls apart, they then don't have a way in which orders are routinely followed. Whereas for us, the police came, We were able to immediately, in fact, the police sometimes ask us, they say, please, can you just keep people quiet for a minute while we talk to you? And so we then give the slogan, and our entire procession just sits and observes non-violent discipline while we allow the police to engage us. So the power relations is very important there, that the police have to ask us to maintain our non-violent discipline. They can no longer maintain it. And in that process of seeing that command structure break down, it means it's a victory for us. They know that they don't want to repress us. They know that the issues we stand for, that we fight for, are very significant, and they can identify with those issues. I'm going to allow a lot more time for questions, but I really just want to come back to the issue of solidarity. And every time I come to America, and I know I was in Turkey just last year, I am very conscious that as someone who has been arrested and can be arrested any moment of my life, I don't have the rights to freedom of expression and assembly. I don't enjoy many other rights that I should enjoy. That when I come to these environments in this developed world, you take these rights very much for granted. And you don't think that you should be part of a fight to defend those rights, to enjoy those rights. And so for us, it's very important for you to have currency in realizing that our struggle in the streets of Bulawayo, in the streets of Harare, is your struggle to carry on enjoying those rights that we are not enjoying. And so solidarity has been a very important thing for us. We need you to spread the message, and especially at this time, we need you to be doing that. We were due to have an election. This is the God willing, and maybe the camera should be switched off for me saying this. Anyway, I can deny it and say someone impersonated me. But God willing, this will be the last election Mugabe will face because of his age. But because it is the last election that he will face, and because his party is disintegrating, because he no longer has the hold on the military that he should have, it is a do or die election. And when I say do or die, it's not just a phrase. Some of us have died, and some of us may die in this violence that is Zimbabwe. And so the election that was due to be held in October has been brought forward to the 31st of July, and we will need whatever solidarity and support that we can have to put our campaigning together to make sure that the citizens of Zimbabwe have a voice and can make their choices and decide what they want to do in the Zimbabwe. If we allow Mugabe to go it alone, he will rig this election, he will win, he will announce himself as president, and in 6 months' time, he will bring his successor in through the back door, and we are not sure what that successor will look like or will do. And so it's very important for us to have a participatory democracy process, to make people have confidence and faith and hope that the ballot can be defended by people and not by the bullet. My last things that I want to just show you is two very important statements that have been made by two politicians in Zimbabwe. This is Ndebele, who belongs to the opposition. Good people, good people. The cost of war, conflict, war management, and misrule is a challenge that scholars are battling with. The World Bank report of 2011 on conflict, security, and development tried to do this and came to the conclusion that for every 5 years of a conflict, a country loses 8 points on its GDP. These are figures. I am living the real life of that loss of GDP. So in 33 years, ZANU-PF insanity has cost our country 40 points of potential growth. The average age a Zimbabwean male is, 45, 37 and 45. I'm way past the average age of normal Zimbabweans. The people that I belong to from the region of Matabeleland, over 20,000 lost their lives in early 80s because Mugabe wanted to kill for good the opposition, and that is what you see, the Gukurahundi massacres of the early 80s. That is the statement, and I want you just to see the operative phrase here and the language that is coming from Ndebele. We need time out this winter. We will end it. We will finish this off just about time. Now, Robert Mugabe, in an interview in a South African TV channel, recently said, and this I selected as the title of my speech, "My people will change me. We will fight to the finish." Will I still be standing here a year from now? The difference is really in your hands, how you help us, how you support us. And there's the challenge. To me, that's a challenge from Robert Mugabe. My people will change me. I'm one of his people, and I intend to change him. Thank you. I believe there should be time for questions. Thank you.
How are you controlling the elections? Like, there are observers and international observers, and how are you managing to be this election different from the other ones?
Thank you. We work in the defend the vote space. We will mobilize people to turn out, but people cannot be mobilized to turn out when they don't think their vote is going to count. So for us, the space that we occupy is, okay, everyone's finished voting, how are we going to make sure it doesn't get stolen? So that's the space WOZA occupies. The others who are good at observing elections and monitoring elections can do that, but there's very few people where I come from defending that vote. So that's the primary work we do. We want to be able to make sure that our members count the results, give that feedback to us. We want to be able to monitor then what is happening. Is there an increase in military? What is the space that we can occupy? Are we going to march? How are we going to march? Is it low risk? Is it high risk? What is the issues? That's the space we occupy. This election may be different because Robert Mugabe is now very old, and I'm not an analyst, but I'm a human being that God gave a brain to, and the Mugabe that I'm seeing in these last year is a melancholy Mugabe. He is realizing that his opportunity to have left a legacy is far gone. And so he may try and find some ways to be legitimate. He may not steal so blatantly. And also, it's not so much about the nation, it's about him bringing a successor in through the back door for his party to try and survive. So I think this election may be different. However, the violence is very obvious, and I was speaking to one of my brothers over there. He was talking of the way in which Africa deploy militia, youth militia. In Zimbabwe, we expect that the military and the army are not the front face of the violence of ZANU-PF. They will recruit youth, give them drugs, alcohol, etc., and those are the guys that are unleashed. Sometimes if they don't have enough of those youth they've recruited, sometimes from the deep rural areas, they take soldiers and they put them in civilian clothes and they unleash them. So I think we need to be, as people on the ground, grassroots organization, we are very able to easily see where the militia is and be able to give to our partners who do good documentation what the hotspots will be and how to avoid it. But I must say, and hopefully I'm right, that WOZA women have managed to maintain the moral authority of a mother of the nation. And so these youth can be quickly put in the place. If we can tell the police commissioner that actually just sort yourself out, this is our right you're trampling on, I think the youth militia will be able to be engaged in that way because of our moral authority.
Jenni, did you call me?
Yes, and then we'll go to
two questions. One is, can you give us a report on men of Zimbabwe Arise? And secondly, because we've been talking about repression, Mugabe developed particular forms of repression and violence in Zimbabwe. Could you tell us about the beating of souls and buttocks, so that
Thank you. Men of Zimbabwe Arise, in 2006, as we had formed the movement, men made representations, old men, young men, and said, you're fighting for the social justice that we know we are also going to enjoy. Can we not participate with you? or are you going to discriminate against us the way we have discriminated against you? And so we said, will you observe non-violent discipline? Will you accept that WOZA is about female leadership capacitation? And they said we would. And so we created a space for them there. However, the numbers are not huge. It's about 10% of our membership. And because of the economic hardships, we find that there's a lot of mobility in that membership because men don't have jobs, they don't have anything to do, so they're constantly trying to find opportunities in South Africa. And so there is that mobility, and it's a little bit unstabilizing. Women are much more stable. The kind of torture that our members go through is they get beaten on the soles of their feet, which is called falanga. It is done on the soles of your feet because an ultrasound cannot pick up the bruising. It causes severe pain, you can't walk, but there is no way that there can be medical documentation for legal cases to be made. The other issue that they mostly do is there's always a lot of gender insults that come to us. Quite often those people who don't know I'm of mixed race and who judge this book by its cover will accuse me of being a foreign interest and being a white from a Western country. The other issue is youth also face a lot of challenges. It's a funny thing, but they always make the youth sit on air chairs. Sitting on an air chair, you're stressing all your muscles, and it's quite a torturous thing to do that for a long period of time. Those are some of the other forms of torture. The main torture, though, is being put in a cell where the toilets don't flush. The blankets are not blankets. You can mostly see how many lice there are, and the conditions that we are then put in are quite severe, both in the police cells as well as in the prisons. And many times in the prisons of Zimbabwe, there is no food, so you know that if you are in jail, you have to have a support solidarity team that can bring you food. I know the American ambassador, James McGee, once tried to bring me food in Chikurubi, but he was denied entry. But those are the kinds of solidarity things. But mostly also that when you are denied bail and you have no legal way that you are going to appeal, and you just have to sit there basically until some processes, political processes happen. So that's also some form of mental torture. I said you next, eh?
What is it that you've done to ensure that you can leave the country and to attend something like this and get back in?
I just do it. No, I think sometimes there are silly things, like you all know me as Jenny. That's not my full name. And quite often when you spell Jenny in the vernacular, you spell it in a different way. I don't know. By God's graces. Maybe they just keep hoping I don't come back. But I'm going back. Mirelle, and then I'll come to Hardy.
Well, as we said yesterday, every time the Southern Africa Development Community leaders meet, there are two countries on the agenda which are almost identical. It is Zimbabwe and Madagascar. These are almost identical cases, except that your Mugabe is over 90 years old and our Radziwele is only 35 years old. We are afraid that he may last much, much longer. So my question would be, what kind of coalition did WOZA build, to make it sustainable, to make it pervade all sectors of Zimbabwe society?
Being in coalitions has been a challenge for us because we are women. We are often regarded as cannon fodder to put in the front of demonstrations because we are normally brave and able to do that. So it has been a challenge for us to build coalitions. Also, we guard jealously our non-partisan role. We will not support any political party because how will we hold them accountable if we support them? So those have been challenges. But I think despite, when we started, the other NGOs gave us 3 months. 10 years later, we have 90,000 members. and thousands who have been in protests, and some of them have been arrested more than 10, 12 times. I think that, and the manner in which we fight for social justice and the equality that we have within the organization to say, let's do this together, and an injury to one is an injury to all. And that spirit of sisterhood and the values is what has recruited members for us without us even trying. And also the other thing is you have to realize is that women talk. So it's a tell a woman kind of marketing. They're always recruiting. I said Harvey, and then I'll come to...
Женя, когда вы рассказывали про Зимбабве, у меня такое впечатление, что вы говорили про Россию. Только с тем отличием, что нас бьют в полиции не по пяткам, а по голове.
So, Jenni, when you were talking about Zimbabwe, I had a feeling that you were talking about the Russia. The only difference is that in Zimbabwe, they beat the feet of yours, and in Russia, they beat our heads.
Well, they beat our heads too. I just didn't talk about that. Yeah, I have a problem with one of my lungs because of the amount of times I've been beaten across my back. Yeah. Normally, you must wear at least 4 or 5 pairs of pants and padding. Was normally they go for the bottoms.
Очень знакомо. У меня вот какой вопрос.
I have a question.
Как вам удается привлекать средства для движения? И второй вопрос. Не пытаются ли власти Зимбабве обвинить вас в том, что вы иностранный агент и действуете в интересах Америки?
So the first question is, how do you raise finances? How do you do fundraising or just attract money to your movement? And then do Zimbabweans are trying, like opposition of yours is trying to say that you're like the agent of other foreign countries, and do they label you like that, telling that you're an American spy?
Yeah, they try that, but because we have real serious legitimacy and grassroots consultation, they don't manage to get that propaganda to stick. Raising money is hard, and I should also have said that some of you who call yourself Americans should maybe be ashamed to call yourself Americans, because actually the person who has decampaigned us and tried to stop people from funding us more than anyone else in the last 3 months is the American ambassador in Harare. Because he says that we are provoking the police and we are doing illegal things. So, guys, this is a challenge to you. Hey, some of you better go and see the Foreign Office. I can give you the letters I've written to him and his responses.
Или вы привлекаете там деньги там у западных каких-то компаний?
Are you raising money from the citizens of Zimbabwe?
У американских граждан или у зимбабвийских граждан?
From the citizens of Zimbabwe, where are you raising money from?
Wherever we can get it.
Спасибо.
Thank you. I understand.
Jenni, first of all, thank you for your presentation so much. I want to know about the role of the international community, whether it's states or NGOs or multilateral institutions like the UN. In the run-up to this election, what kind of strategy do you guys have, or what role do you see them playing? One. Who, among members of the Zimbabwean opposition, will be interacting with them, whether it's WOZA or anyone else? And then the third part of this is just as American citizens, if we were to call our members of Congress, what might we say and when might be the best time to call?
Okay, we need the urgent deployment of observers and monitors into Zimbabwe. As I said, Mugabe has intentionally brought this election forward to 31st of July because he knows we're all not ready. We were planning for an October election. And our strategy has been to call for early deployment. We have been calling for early deployment from January. So knowing that we were calling for early deployment, he has then brought the election early. So we need urgent people to come on the ground. They may not allow the United Nations. Normally they don't want any imperialist organizations to come and observe elections. But there are other ways. What was it? Stephen said unaccompanied, what is the, yeah. Those are the kind of people that we need, come in, do these things unofficially. There are always ways in which we can make huge space in the underground for some sort of monitoring and evaluation, monitoring and observation of the elections. The opposition you will find extremely ambivalent, and they never seem to have the same message day after day. They will keep changing. However, persevere with them. They will deliver messages. We have other NGOs who are good at that form of lobby and advocacy, who will remain engaging. Some of you, for us, we will now be back in the underground doing the hard work of mobilization and getting ready to defend the vote. What should you say? You should educate your member of parliament, your Senate person, on what strategic nonviolence is. I hope you learned something here, because that's what I want you to be telling them, so that they can then make sure they speak to Johnny Carson and they speak to other officials in the Foreign Office. Maybe even just remind Barack that I once met him in 2009, where he gave us an award for strategic nonviolence, that the ambassador is now telling me is illegal. Yeah. So those are some of the things that I really wish you would do. The embassy is very easily located in Washington. I know I was once arrested in Washington, D.C. at the Zim embassy. Please, I'm welcoming you there as a Zimbabwean.
Thank you, Jenny, for this great presentation. When you were describing, when I saw the pictures and you were describing, especially the last part describing those methods of torture, you reminded me of the Ben Ali era in Tunisia. That was exactly. And based on that, I can say that we've gone through similar conditions, and the regime of Ben Ali is over. So I think very soon, even the regime of Mugabe will be over. My question, however, is related to the post-Mugabe era. When the revolution happened in Tunisia, it was somehow like surprise. And then the goal was to get rid of Ben Ali, and we succeeded in that. But since January 14th, 2011, we have faced many problems, and we are still facing problems. We thought democracy will be easily established after Ben Ali, but actually much work is still needed, especially at the level of education, etc. Also, the economic condition of the country has been sinking since then. So, in the absence of a good economic climate, we cannot talk about sustainable democracy. So, the challenges we are facing now maybe are greater than the problems we used to face on the days of Ben Ali. So, I'm asking if there are any thinking about the post-Mugabe era in case he leaves. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Those are depressing questions. Let's rewind and don't ask that question. Anyway, yeah, I think, it's important. In WOZA, we have begun to look at that phase. We have studied Mahatma Gandhi's obstructive and constructive campaigns. In 2006, we envisaged the Zimbabwe we want. We have that in place. All that we don't have in Zimbabwe is a strong, genuine, democratic opposition, misnamed Movement for Democratic Change. So I think the struggle will enter a new phase. There may be a time where WOZA will have to stop the obstructive program and begin the constructive program. But it's not easy, and this is why we cannot think that removing a dictator is bringing democracy. And that's why I said at the beginning of my speech, we are not in a revolution in Zimbabwe, we are in an evolution. We must change the hearts and minds of Zimbabweans so that they demand a more accountable leader, so that they understand democracy and live it. And then very soon we will change the way the ruling elite dominate our politics in Africa. Was that a hand for a question?
That was just one more
No.
question.
That was one more question.
Okay, I thought you were asking a question. Yeah. There we go.
Gracias por tu presentación, Jenny.
Thank you for your presentation, Jenny.
Tu energía, tu alegría,
Your energy and your joy
muestran cómo es tu movimiento, cómo es el movimiento de ustedes.
demonstrates what your movement is like.
Y yo un poco iba en la perspectiva del compañero, ¿no? Del hermano.
And I have something along the same lines as our brother over there from Tunisia.
Ustedes están pensando en tratar más bien lo que tú decías de ir construyendo una democracia desde abajo, ampliando de manera horizontal esta energía, esta alegría, esta inspiración del movimiento.
Are you guys in your constructive program that you're talking about setting about trying to build, as you're talking about a democracy from below, trying to broaden and horizontalize this process of democracy?
Porque la experiencia en Sudamérica particularmente,
because the South American experience particularly,
ha habido un proceso desde abajo para cuidar el voto en las elecciones.
There's been a process from below to try to safeguard the integrity of the vote during the elections.
Desde Venezuela hasta la Argentina.
From Venezuela to Argentina.
Pero en el fondo, después de un tiempo, decimos ganamos, pero al mismo tiempo perdimos.
But behind all that, after a while, we've said that, we win, but then later on we lose.
Entonces, quizás valdría la pena ir pensando en una perspectiva más a largo plazo, pero pensando más allá de las elecciones, más allá del Estado.
But maybe it might be good to have perhaps a long-term plan in which you think farther, more in the long term and beyond elections and perhaps beyond the state even.
Es decir, ampliar la fuerza suficiente como para poder imponer, si vale el término, nuestra propia agenda al margen de quién esté en el gobierno.
In other words, to be able to broaden broaden the base so that no matter who's in power, the base can impose its will upon whoever's in power.
That's exactly what we have been doing, and that's why we guard jealously the space of being non-partisan. But I think for us the most important thing is the intervention, and really I wish to thank ICNC and some of you here who have been helping us and advising us, giving us theory that sometimes we say, what the hell is that guy talking about? But we challenge ourselves to say, how can we apply that to the ground? And for us, I think the most important thing is like those 198 methods of Gene Sharp is where we do a lot of our constructive work. We have deputations, delegations to the local headmaster. The toilets are not working in the church. Our members will gather, they will choose, they will drill each other of who is speaking to the headmaster. They will get that issue handled. If they don't get it handled in the delegation or deputation, they will escalate and the numbers will increase. We need speed humps, we need jobs, we need this, we need that. So all those protests that have been done in this very decentralized, devolved way, in the structure of WOZA, is the way that we have been demanding development, demanding a constructive way in which everyone's lives can be changed. For example, our electricity program. Our members were suffering with high costs of electricity, and they kept complaining that the costs are high, but we only have electricity for 50% of the time. And yet they don't deduct 50% off our bill. So for 6 years we campaigned low risk, high risk, local level, national level, until the electricity company reduced their tariffs by 50%. The whole of Zimbabwe benefited from that campaign. What did we call that campaign? Power to the people. So we brought it to the bigger issue that we couldn't talk about that issue, but we could talk about it by targeting the electricity company. So those are some of the things that for us are part of the constructive program, making people's lives livable, bringing social justice into their momentary life day by day, making lives easier for women, the mothers of the nation. Yeah, I have to choose my brother.
It looks to me like you have so many victories, and your next victory is this election, and it looks like it's something I could borrow. because change from the ballot is what truths mean and what I wish for my home country. Now, the problem I want to understand your thoughts as a person on ground is it about the people not wanting to go to the polls, or is it that they go as you wish but the votes don't count?
It's about the rigging. You know, in 1980, the British decided that they didn't want Joshua Nkomo, who had Chinese backing. They wanted Robert Mugabe, who came from the Russian support base. And so they rigged the first election. And so we have long-term rigging of all these elections. So people know this and they think their vote won't count. But we have recently written a new constitution, and people feel that because they have the new constitution, that maybe this time their votes will count. So I think that's the issue, is to make the arguments to people to say that if you are going to vote, we know that you might be beaten along the way, you might be told that we will know exactly who you voted for, you will have lots of intimidation. Be brave, go and cast your vote, but follow your vote, mother your vote. It's your child. Make sure you nurture it, bring it up, make it grow up and count for you.
Wait.